Hello guys, welcome back to Anime Moments. Today is explanation of upcoming episode of Against the Gods based on novel. So let's start explanation. Just as the net of swords formed, Xiao Wui's speed suddenly rose sharply, and his entire person rushed over as though he had turned into a black beam of light. Within the four major sects, Xiao sect's movement profound skills takes the throne, and Xiao Wui's speed had more so reached an extremely outrageous extent. Under his extreme speed, sword mirages sewn together and blotted out the sky, causing one's eyes to fail to keep up and be dazzled. Yunche's eyes narrowed. He was never advantageous in terms of speed, but he also never dreaded enemies whose speed far surpassed his. Because no matter how shockingly fast one's speed was, or how fancy their skills were, all he needed to do was a simple sword strike. Stepping with Star God's broken shadow, Yunche took a casual step forward. As the mirages lengthened, he instantaneously shifted forward a distance of 20 steps and smashed a sword strike towards Xiao Wui's sword array. Clang 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 clang. Clang. Xiao Wui's sword mirages were like a rampant tide as they teared the space itself to the point of near collapse. As for the blow from Yunche's heavy sword, it was like a flood dragon tumbling within the wild storm and tide, reversing the flow and looking down upon the world. In an instant, the overwhelming sword mirages were all blown into bits and the sword body directly collided with Dragon Fault. Amidst an extremely ear-piercing collision noise, Xiao Wui grunted and tumbled away. When he landed, he raised up his sword horizontally with a frown, and shockingly discovered that over a few dozen nicks had actually appeared on the sword's body. Xiao Wui's facial expression convulsed for a while. Before he came here, he naturally had heard that the heavy sword in Yunche's hand was incredibly terrifying, and that one mustn't directly clash with it. But as a superior and lofty throne, how could he be willing to fear a junior? However, after just a single round of clashing with Yunche, both his arms were already struck numb. His beloved sword that accompanied him for a few dozen years had actually been ruined all over, even almost losing the possibility to be completely fixed. Xiao Wui put away the long sword. His fist tightly clenched to the extent that his bones creaked. You really do have some competence. Seems like I have to get more or less serious now. Screech! With an explosive noise, the majestic eagle behind Xiao Wui suddenly tore apart, turning into an enormous rotating cyclone. Right after, this cyclone abruptly expanded with an extremely quick speed, until it expanded to nearly 100 meters around Xiao Wui. Extreme wind. Domain. The glum voice seemingly resounded right beside one's ears. Xiao Wui's steps slightly moved, and in an instant, he had already suddenly appeared in front of Yunche. This instant burst of speed was as fast as the rolling thunder, and was even several times faster than the speed from before. Everyone present, including Yunche, all could only faintly catch a hint of a suddenly passing afterimage. The cyclone moved along with Xiao Wui, instantly enveloped Yunche within. Following a roar from Xiao Wui, the cyclone suddenly went berserk, and everything within 100 meters around Yunche had completely become winds from hell. Each and every single thread of wind had turned into the sharpest blade. As it swept across, it was as if a green-colored turbulent billow crazily engulfed toward Yunche. The expression in Yunche's eyes slightly changed, but it wasn't panicked at all. With a loud roar, Dragon Fault furiously swept up as a dragon cry overwhelmed the fierce cyclone and traveled straight above the high skies. The greatly expanding heavy sword beam was like a roaring vicious dragon as it rushed into the cyclone as though breaking through bamboo. That terrifying might seemed as if it could even pierce through the void of space. Shring 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 shring. The chaotic green light connected together into an enormous field as the sound of the collision and tearing impacted everyone's eardrums. The cyclones within the extreme wind domain were wreaking havoc, as tens of thousands of sharp blades attempted to completely tear Yunche into pieces. But when these cyclones touched Dragon Fault's sword beam, they were all shattered into nothingness. Amidst the dragon cry, a gap over 3 meters wide was directly blasted out from the 100-meter-wide extreme wind domain. Yunche's figure shook, and instantly vaulted out. Before he even landed, his body had already abruptly turned back around. Dragon Fault continuously swung, and 7 strokes of Phoenix Breaks smashed towards Xiao Wui, carrying the Phoenix Flame's scorching heat and the heavy sword's might. Boom 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 boom. The extreme wind domain that could mince everything actually wasn't able to block Dragon Fault's overbearing power, and 7 holes were instantly torn on its surface. Phoenix flames flooded in from the gaps and burned with the wind. In the turn of an eye, the entire extreme wind domain directly transformed into a sea of phoenix flames. Within the sea of flames, a person's silhouette flew out in a fluster and landed in an extremely embarrassing fashion with more than half of the cloak on his body burnt out, revealing his entire face. Staring at Yunche, the color of shock filled his eyes. Only after personally crossing swords with Yunche, did he clearly understand Yunche's terror and truly understood why the entire Burning Heaven clan had almost been destroyed by his hand. The dreadfulness of him and his heavy sword had entirely surpassed his expectations. The mighty domain he casted using the strength of an emperor profound was actually so effortlessly destroyed by him. He actually couldn't think of anything in the entire blue wind that the heavy sword in his hands couldn't destroy. Yunche's surprising terror made his heart turn cold in his shock, and made his determination to kill Yunche today no matter what, even firmer. Otherwise, with his disposition of seeking revenge on any small grievance, it would be extremely likely for Xiao Sect to become the second Burning Heaven clan. Xiao Wui discreetly grasped onto a heaven-decimating orb within his hands. Xiao Wui stood up and coldly laughed with solemnness. You are indeed powerful, no wonder you could force Burning Heaven clan to this state. But if you think you could defeat me just like this, then you couldn't be more wrong. How can I, the great Xiao Sect Xiao Wui, ever lose in the hands of a junior like you? Xiao Wui's gaze darkened. He suddenly let out a loud roar, and his body fiercely shot out. All of his power concentrated on his right hand as his entire body swept up a gigantic jade-green cyclone and rushed straight toward Yunche. HMPH, you're way over your head. Even if the Yunche 2 days ago didn't open purgatory, he could already deal with Xiao Wui, not to mention that Yunche's overall strength had a new breakthrough. He lifted his arms and was just about to greet the attack. Then all of a sudden, his intuition abruptly snapped as a strong feeling of danger came toward his face, making his attacking motion instantly freeze. At the same time, Jasmine's shout came from his brain, avoid it. There is an abnormal power response coming from his hand. Quickly, dodge it. Xiao Wui's face also revealed a vicious smile. His hand that had been tightly clenched suddenly opened, and a beam of faintly purple-colored light shot out with an extremely quick speed. Go to hell. Xiao Wui's speed was already extraordinarily fast, and this heaven-decimating orb that was shot out from his hand was more so fast to its limit. With this kind of speed, as well as a distance of less than 60 meters away from the two, even a throne wouldn't have any chance of avoiding it at all. The purple dot of light quickly grew larger within his pupils. Things that could make him sense danger was definitely not ordinary. Without thinking at all, his body fiercely swayed. Whoosh! Heaven-decimating orb smashed onto Yunche's body, but before Xiao Wui could utter out his grim laugh, he suddenly saw that this heaven-decimating orb had actually passed through Yunche's figure and continued flying in a straight line. As for Yunche's true body, it was already diagonally in the air 30 meters away. When Yunche had the heavy sword on him, even though his speed was extremely deficient, relying on the star god's broken shadow allowed his ability to instantaneous dodge and assault to be extremely powerful, which also nearly perfectly covered the largest weakness of the heavy sword. While Xiao Wui was quite shocked when looking at the slowly dispersing Yunche afterimage, his response was still extraordinarily quick. In the next instant, he had already locked onto Yunche's position after he moved, as another heaven-decimating orb shot out toward the air. 2 consecutive orbs, with the time between them no more than 1/10 of a breath. This time, Yunche, who was in midair, simply couldn't avoid it at all. He tightly clenched his teeth, as his entire body's profound energy crazily flooded up. Sealing cloud-locking sun. Boom! As if the sky and earth were collapsing, 2 huge overlapping rumbles sounded at the same time. Even though the surrounding Burning Heaven disciples hastily protected themselves with profound energy, their ears were still in extreme pain, even their eardrums were bleeding. 2 balls of firelight surged up to the skies accompanying the scream of lightning, and everything within 100 meters was all minced into dust. The Burning Heaven elders who were relatively closer were all pushed away a great distance by a surge of storm that came head-on. They quickly channeled profound energy as their faces were full of fright. Just mere residual waves were already so overbearing, its true power was simply frightening to an unimaginable extent. Such a power was entirely enough to gravely injure a true throne with ease. While Sky Profounds, or even half a step into Emperor Profounds, simply didn't have any chance of survival under such a destructive power at all. Beneath the lightning and fire, puffs after puffs of thick smoke slowly ascended, yet oddly didn't disperse out along with the storm. Moreover, after it ascended to a certain height, it just condensed there and didn't disperse. The color of the smoke was an eccentric green color. A poisonous fog that kills when it enters one's body. Xiao Wui's steps quickly retreated. After seeing the exploded lightning fire, his eyes finally revealed a grim smile. Then, he directly tilted his head up and laughed wildly. Fen Yijue's expressions also relaxed. The faces of Fen Duanhuan and the elders also all revealed the expression of surprise and joy. They had all seen Yunche get struck by the heaven-decimating orb with their eyes wide open. With such a power, even if Yunche didn't die, he would definitely be gravely injured on the spot. And if he touched the acute poison fog while being heavily injured, he would most certainly die. Is he dead? A burning heaven elder asked, full of excitement. This terrifying devil was finally going to fall before his eyes. He was so moved that tears almost filled his old eyes. HMPH. Xiao Wui pridefully said while sneering. Heaven-decimating orb's power is unparalleled, even our sect's Grand Sect Master wouldn't dare to face its edge head-on. The spot that the heaven-decimating orb had struck also just happened to be Yunche's chest. He is undoubtedly dead. Oh? Is that so? A mocking voice suddenly came beyond the smoke and fog. Then I really apologize, it seems that I'm still alive and well. WH. What? This voice resounded beside everyone's ears like waves of thunder, causing them to simultaneously stare with wide eyes as their hearts abruptly tightened. After the voice fell, Yunche's silhouette also slowly emerged beyond the smoke and fog. His eyes were vicious and sharp, a mocking sneer hung on the corner of his mouth, as his entire body emitted a faint air of anger and dense killing intent. So this thing is called Heaven-Decimating Orb? TSK, this name really is boundlessly arrogant, and the impression it gives is quite good as well. Too bad it's goddamn useless. Even though Yunche spoke light-heartedly, he genuinely did get startled to the extent of become covered in cold sweat just now. If not for Sealing Cloud-Locking Sun's powerful protection, the heaven-decimating orb's shocking power was entirely enough to heavily injure him on the spot. It wasn't like Yunche had never made contact with Xiao Sect's firearms before. When he was at New Moon City's Xiao Sect branch sect in the past, he had found the poison fire rod and sky tremor bomb, but their might simply couldn't be mentioned in the same conversation if compared to the heaven-decimating orb earlier. After the fog dissipated, the position that Yunche stood was offsetted by few dozen meters from where he was originally at, but there were no injuries on his body at all, not even a speck of blood could be seen. You, Xiao Wui, who had always been lofty, indifferent, and believed that everything was in his control, widened his eyes to the limit in his stare. His pupils violently constricted, as if he had seen the most terrifying demon god. One word crazily bounced back and forth in his heart. Impossible. 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 What had struck Yunche earlier wasn't any low-level thunder tremor cracker or sky tremor bomb, but their Xiao Sect's crown treasure, the heaven-decimating orb that the entire Xiao Sect only had over 20 of, which even Emperor Profound practitioners couldn't endure. Not only was the heaven-decimating orb's power extremely great, it also would scatter poisonous smoke after it explodes. Once the poison meets blood, it would quickly invade one's body, and cause the victim to die from the poison's activation in a few breaths of time. If breathed in, the poison would similarly show effect very quickly. Yet Yunche just stood there within the poisonous fog with a sneering face, and didn't look to be any different from usual at all. To be honest, the power of this thing called heaven-decimating orb is quite good, and this poison is considerably formidable as well. Yunche stared at the Xiao Wui who was in shock, and slowly spoke. This kind of poison is refined using burning vein grass, thousand vermin flower, midnight skeleton vine, demon wheat blood-woven flower, the venom of acute venom snake, and thunderfire toad's toad poison. The poison is incredibly acute, and shows effect extremely fast. Once it invades the body, even a throne would find it hard to suppress. And if one was first struck by the heaven-decimating orb, then breathed in this kind of poisonous mist, perhaps even a throne wouldn't have much of a chance to survive. Yunche's steps started to move forward, as his voice became increasingly icy. At least until now, I haven't done any disservice toward your Xiao sect, and even never had much contact and conflicts. Yet you, Xiao sect, in order to kill me, had actually deliberately planned so much and used such foul means. It really is quite fantastic. Yunche's words made Xiao Wui's heart violently convulse. Yunche had actually listed the acute poison's ingredients hidden within the heaven-decimating orb, without the slightest error. The impact brought by him being all fine and dandy under the heaven-decimating orb, along with these few sentences he spoke, had even made Xiao Wui's psychological line of defense violently sway. Thinking about burning Heaven Clan's miserable state, then thinking about the consequences of not being able to kill Yunche, the cold sweat on his back instantly flooded down like rain. Yunche's name seeped out of the gap between Xiao Wui's teeth. Yunche walked increasingly closer in his view and gradually neared to a distance of only 30 meters between them. As he neared, an uncontrollable feeling of fear was quickly born in the bottom of Xiao Wui's heart. Staring his eyes wide and tightly clenching down his teeth, his right hand that had always been tightly clenched into a fist suddenly moved, and at the same time grasped onto two heaven-decimating orbs that he was about to toss out. Knowing that Xiao Wui had hit such terrifying things like heaven-decimating orb, Yunche's entire body's consciousness stretched tight, and most of his awareness was concentrated onto Xiao Wui's palm. As his palm slightly moved oddly, Yunche's eyes suddenly flashed, and phoenix flames ignited from his entire body. Empyrean Dance of the Phoenix. The reason why Yunche had neared Xiao Wui step by step was precisely for this moment. Just as Xiao Wui took out two heaven-decimating orbs and was about to toss them out, a flame silhouette suddenly swayed in front of him, and an extremely ferocious power suddenly flooded over. Its speed was fast to the point that made him, a throne, unable to react in time. He only had enough time to distinctively see Yunche's eyes suddenly nearing, and while his wrist had just started the flinging motion, an utterly overbearing power had already violently smashed onto his chest. Boom! The power of Empyrean Dance of the Phoenix while using Dragon Fault wasn't at all inferior to a heaven-decimating orb. Xiao Wui's sternum made a snapping sound and he flew out horizontally within a scream of agony, while those two heaven-decimating orbs that were about to be thrown also slipped out of his hand. With a turn of his body, Yunche quickly caught the two purple-colored dots of light in his hands. Once the heaven-decimating orb entered his hands, he simply perceived the profound formation on it and understood the method of using it. Bang! Xiao Wui fell over 100 meters away, and after tumbling over a dozen times on the ground, he stood up in a fluster, holding his badly mutilated chest with one hand and desperately extinguishing the phoenix flames on his body with the other. He took off into the air and hysterically fled away. HMPH, want to run? Yunche's gaze darkened. Putting away Dragon Fault, his speed reached the extreme limit as he swiftly chased. However, Xiao Wui flew higher and higher, and even though his speed wasn't inferior, he couldn't truly catch up. Yunche raised his head up. Locking onto Xiao Wui's position, he grabbing a heaven-decimating orb with his right hand, and abruptly flicked his wrist. The prerequisite condition as to why Yunche could so freely swing the 10,000-kilogram Dragon Fault around was his incomparably terrifying arm strength. Under such an arm strength, it was unknown just how many times faster the heaven-decimating orb he tossed out was compared to the time Xiao Wui had tossed it. Xiao Wui, who only had escape in mind, suddenly heard an extremely sharp howl of the wind coming from behind him. He subconsciously turned his head around, to his surprise, saw a purple speck of light that was already less than a feet away. Ahhh, Xiao Wui's eye sockets burst apart, as a hoarse scream of despair came from his mouth. Boom! Heaven-decimating orb exploded, as if a world-shaking divine thunderbolt had exploded in midair. The shockwave caused the entire burning Heaven clan to tremble. Firelight surged to the skies and lightning crazily went rampant as the poisonous fog slowly spread. A black silhouette was blasted toward the high skies, then quickly plummeted and heavily smashed onto the ground. The cloak on Xiao Wui's body was blown into pieces, his entire body badly mutilated. The poisonous fog mixed into his bloodstream and ruthlessly executed its purpose, making him continuously roll around as he uttered screams of extreme pain. Yunche leisurely walked over, all the way until he walked to his side, then took up Dragon Fault and stabbed down expressionlessly. PSHHH? Dragon Fault's thick and blunt sword tip stabbed into Xiao Wui's body without any resistance and directly pierced his heart. Xiao Wui's body stiffened for a moment, his bulging eyes stared straight at Yunche for a while, then his body completely limped down and no longer moved anymore. Within 3 days, 2 thrones had consecutively lost their lives under Dragon Fault. Yunche stripped Xiao Wui's spatial ring off, casually scanned their contents, and a satisfied smile instantly emerged on his face. As Xiao Sect's Grand Elder, there were naturally no ordinary things on Xiao Wui's body. If any random thing within was to be taken out, it would almost always be a treasure that ordinary people wouldn't dare to wish for. And within these, there was still another heaven-decimating orb, and as well as several special keys, which ought to be used to open certain important places of Xiao Sect. Kicking away Xiao Wui's corpse, Yunche turned around, looking at Fen Duanhuan and those elders whose face had turned ashen long ago. The fact that heaven-decimating orb wasn't able to hurt Yunche had already caused their heart to fall into the valley's very bottom. And Xiao Wui's miserable death now caused their last hint of hope to entirely turn into despair. Will you choose to end yourselves, or do you want me to personally do it? Yunche's eyes narrowed as he spoke coldly. Amongst the 33 pavilion masters and 27 elders, only over a dozen of them were left. But even these dozen of people together wouldn't possibly be Yunche's match. The only person who could battle with Yunche, Grand Clan Master Fen Yijue, was also bearing heavy injuries. Sadness and despair filled everyone's hearts, making them unable to rile up even the slightest wisp of will to resist and struggle. Yunche, you really going to spare no one? Fen Yijue said with his teeth grinding. Yunche's expression was overcast. Each and every one of his words was ice cold. I have given you chances, and gave you leeway many times. It is you that once and once again insisted in pressing me to exterminate your clan. Today, all of you will die, and starting tomorrow, there will no longer be a Burning Heaven clan in this world. Yunche raised his arm, the heavy dragon fault pointed at the despairing Fen Yijue as he issued the final judgment. Fen Yijue took up the absolute flame blade, raised his head up and let out a long sigh. My Burning Heaven clan's 1,000 years of heritage was actually ruined in my generation. What face do I have to face my generations of ancestors? Yunche, my Burning Heaven clan reaching this current state, is indeed also brought onto us by ourselves, and cannot entirely be blamed on you. But the disciples under our clan are entirely innocent. I believe you wouldn't lay a hand on them either. After we dismiss all of them, we'll commit suicide ourselves. Heh, Yunche coldly laughed. The laughter was so sinister and cold as if it had come from the throat of the devil. Are your ears deaf? I had just said that today, all of you will die, all of you. On the day you despicably abducted my family, I had already swore to make your Burning Heaven clan turn into a river of blood. Not even a blade of grass will be left. Fen Yijue abruptly raised his head. The faces of Fen Duanhuan and several elders all revealed expressions of extreme shock and terror. All those surrounding Burning Heaven disciples started to tremble in fear. The meaning within Yunche's words actually implied that not only was he going to kill Burning Heaven clan's clan master, elders, and pavilion masters, he was going to kill everyone within Burning Heaven clan from top to bottom, making the entire Burning Heaven clan, truly and genuinely, face total annihilation. A dense chilly breeze creeped over the entire bodies of everyone in Burning Heaven clan. They never would have thought that Yunche's revenge would actually be so cruel and absolute. Fen Yijue's voice started to tremble. You. Even if my Burning Heaven clan had done a disservice to you first, it still shouldn't receive such a retribution. The disciples under the clan don't have any grudges and grievances with you at all. You simply don't have any reason to kill them. Do you not fear the wrath of heavens? Yunche smiled. It was a smile that Fen Yijue and the others could never possibly understand. He said with a low voice, the number of people I had killed in these 2 lives of mine, even far surpasses the number of people you lot had seen in your entire lives. As for the sins of killing that I shoulder, even receiving the heaven's wrath 10,000 times wouldn't be enough. So what if a few more tens of thousands are added onto it? You had time and time again nearly brought death to me, and that I can neglect. But kidnapping my family, and almost killing them. Just for this reason, you will have to repay the debt with total annihilation. For every person of your burning heaven clan that lives, one more seed of hatred would be buried. If by chance this hatred sprouts out of the ground someday, it would possibly endanger my grandfather and little aunt's safety. No matter how insignificant this possibility is, I will absolutely not allow it to exist. And together with this reason alone, all of you must die. Yunche's words didn't have the slightest emotion, and didn't have the slightest of leeway. Like mutters from the devil, it made one's soul tremble. As his voice fell, he had already vaulted up, and as the heavy sword swung out, more than a dozen strokes of phoenix flames flew toward the surrounding burning heaven disciples amidst the howling wind. Boom, 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 boom. Flames that surged up to the sky exploded at various locations, and then quickly spread, burning crowds and crowds of burning heaven disciples' bodies into ashes, completely drowning the entire burning heaven clan within the miserable screams of agony in the turn of an eye. Seeing the large crowds of clan disciples fall in the blink of an eye, the bodies of Fen Duanhuan and the others trembled, and they almost wanted to wail out loud. They had originally thought that they had mistakenly provoked a vicious wolf, a ferocious tiger, but only at this moment did they truly realize what they provoked was simply a madman, a devil. You devil! Even if we are to be smashed into bits and pieces, we'll still drag you down to hell with us. Bringing their injured bodies with them, the burning heaven elders who had initially wished to end themselves grabbed their burning heaven blades and charged toward Yunche carrying endless grief and despair within bloodshot eyes. From top to bottom, burning heaven clan no longer had the strength worthy to battle with Yunche. Even though there were still tens of thousands of disciples, it still wouldn't cause any threat to Yunche even if their numbers were to double. Following burning heaven elders' roars, everyone stepped on their fears of annihilation and the grief of the clan's destruction. Uttering howls after howls of wolf-like sounds, they grabbed their weapons and rushed toward Yunche. Yunche raised up his head, his gaze sweeping toward the quickly nearing crowd. There wasn't a single hint of fluctuation on his tranquil expression. Ahead of him, the last 13 elders of Burning Heaven clan rushed up altogether. Amidst despair, grief, and indignation, their expressions were completely distorted, their eyes stared round to the extent of almost bursting. Carrying various degrees of injuries on their body, they erupted a strength far surpassing their ordinary selves. Yunche unfeelingly raised the gigantic sword and stepped forward, which was also the first step of today's massacre. And it was more so the first step to send Burning Heaven clan into the abyss of total annihilation. Boom! The 13 Burning Heaven elders only wished that they could perish together with Yunche. Facing Yunche's strike, they didn't even bother to dodge, and forcefully greeted forward. But the strength of the sky-profound realm simply didn't have any threat at all in the current Yunche's eyes. Amidst a rumbling sound, they were all blown flying, and half of them instantly sustained heavy injuries. Yunche stepped forward again as a second wave of power erupted from Dragon Fault, straight toward Fen Duanhuan. Fen Duanhuan wasn't Yunche's match from the start, and in addition to that, his wounds hadn't healed yet. He was blasted away by Yunche with a single strike as one of his arms fractured on the spot. However, Yunche did not follow up on him. Instead, his gaze locked onto the Fen Ijua behind Fen Duanhuan, and ferocious phoenix flames were fiercely swung out from the heavy sword. The frightening power sliced out a violent ripple in space and the scorching light of fire shone upon Fen Ijua's ghastly pale face. His footsteps retreated backwards as both of his arms guarded before his body with all his strength. Bang! The phoenix flame exploded, but the oppressive strength coming from heavy sword wasn't blown apart, and destructively impacted Fen Ijua's barely constructed defense. Recklessly using profound energy under heavy injuries, and then receiving fierce strike, caused Fen Ijua to finally spew out a large mouth of blood as all of his energy dissipated after he consecutively retreated over several dozens meters. Phoenix Break drove straight through, smashed onto Fen Ijua's chest, and exited through his backside with a scream. Grand Clan Master! Grand Clan Master! Fen Ijua looked at the utterly chaotic Burning Heaven clan scattered about in a mess with a dumbfounded expression, and for a moment, the scenery of the once dignified and glorious Burning Heaven clan emerged before his eyes. But these sceneries of before turned into a boundless blank space at the very end, and his body also slowly fell within this vacant world without boundaries. The last sounds heard beside his ears were the voices of tragically grief-stricken cries surrounding him. Even though Fen Ijua hadn't appeared publicly for over 20 years, he was, from beginning to end, Burning Heaven's true foundation. His death also meant that Burning Heaven clan was truly and genuinely finished. No need to shout so loudly. Yunche expressionlessly spoke, because all of you will accompany him to hell shortly. As his voice fell, a colossal ball of phoenix flames suddenly exploded, and in an instant, the violent fire of the phoenix drowned several hundred meters of distance surrounding him and swept countless Burning Heaven disciples into the flaming purgatory of certain death. The phoenix flames spread with the wind, engulfing more and more of Burning Heaven clan's land. Even though it was already dawn, the incomparably scorching firelight still painted the skies above Burning Heaven clan with the color of blood. Ua! Xiao Juetian, who was in deep thought with his eyes closed, abruptly stood up as though he was suddenly struck by a thunderbolt. Both of his hands were trembling, his forehead was instantly covered in cold sweat. "Sect Master, what happened?" The elderly person beside him anxiously asked. The corner of Xiao Juetian's eyes trembled, and his face clearly displayed deep shock and fright. As the Xiao sect's sect master, he had almost never revealed such an expression. Second uncle's soul imprint disappeared. He died. What? Black-clothed elderly person uncontrollably shouted with shock, and then shook his head in fear. Impossible. Elder Wui's profound strength is only second to Grand Sect Master and is almost unmatched in the entire Blue Wind. Moreover, he had an entire 5 heaven decimating orbs on him. How can he possibly? I don't want to believe it either, but the soul imprint won't lie. Second uncle has indeed died. Moreover, from the weakening of the soul imprint to the time it completely vanished, only a few breaths of time had passed from start to finish. Not only did second uncle die, it had been tragically done in under an extremely strong power. With second uncle's strength at the 3rd level of the Emperor profound, being able to kill him in such a short amount of time. As Xiao Juetian spoke till here, he could no longer bear to continue speaking any further. He clearly felt a gust of chilly wind surging within his spine, the cold seeping deep into his marrow. Yunche heavily wounding Fen Ijua and killing Fen Zia had already caused him to be shocked at his might. And Xiao Wui quickly dying within a short period of time, told him even more about how terrifying of an extent Yunche's strength had already reached. Most importantly, Xiao Wui dying testified that not only was he unable to kill Yunche, he was instead killed by Yunche. After Yunche finishes dealing with Burning Heaven clan, the previous hatred 3 years ago in addition to the new enmity now. Xiao Juetian's entire back was even quickly doused by cold sweat. He suddenly raised his head, and said with an urgent voice, "Immediately. Immediately go ask Bluefire's branch sect to scout the current state of Burning Heaven clan with all their power, quickly go." Yes. The black-clothed elderly person quickly went away. After heavily breathing a few times, Xiao Juetian quickly calmed down, then dashed out of the main pavilion with haste, and headed directly toward the secret ground Grand Sect Master Xiao Wuqing was at. He had already felt that a great calamity concerning Xiao Sect's survival was about to come, and there was almost no way this great calamity could be avoided. The entire Xiao Sect had to make any preparations that could possibly be done starting now. Burning Heaven Valley's air today was extraordinarily scorching. A ball of incomparably hot flame crazily burned in the center of Burning Heaven Valley, and in less than 2 hours of time, it creeped out over 5 kilometers away and completely engulfed the Burning Heaven clan's 1,000-year-old territory until it was burned into a barren wasteland. Under the flames was one after another pile of corpses burned into charcoal. From Burning Heaven clan's elders to several tens of thousands of ordinary disciples, no one was able to escape from this sea of flames ignited by the Phoenix Flame, and all lost their lives under the Phoenix Flame and Dragon Fault. A true field littered with corpses, devoid of all life. The once high and mighty Burning Heaven clan looked up with awe by others, and could be called the Blue Wind Sacred Ground, was turned into charred ground just in this one single day, and became a graveyard looming with a burnt, barren, and despairing atmosphere. Standing within the blackened debris, looking at the burning Heaven clan completely destroyed by him, Yunche didn't feel joy, didn't feeling pity, and didn't feel conceited or prideful from having destroyed one of the 4 major sects. What he felt instead was calmness. Tens of thousands of people being buried under his flames and heavy sword, yet he was as calm as though he had merely squashed a crowd of lowly ants to death. And this kind of calmness wasn't deliberately acted out or sustained by him, it was instead a true and genuine calmness that stems from the soul. Ordinary people couldn't possibly witness such a situation and scenery, and more so couldn't cause them. Yet to him, it was already too many times. Back then, it was because of enmity. Those people that killed his master, he used the heaven-opposing poison of the sky poison pearl, and made those sects face total annihilation one by one, making entire sects, and even the surrounding cities into fields of stacked corpses. And amongst them, there were even many sects whose scope and scale far surpassed the burning Heaven clan. Today, it was similarly because of enmity. Even though Xiao Lai and Xiao Lingxi were both already rescued by him, and were all safe and sound, after experiencing his past life, he would never let himself to idiotically take pity and be merciful. Even if he was to be called the devil, be cast aside, cursed, and feared by the people of the world, he still absolutely would not regret today. Because in his previous life, it was precisely because of mercy that other people had forced his master to die, it was precisely because of mercy, that after many times of scraping past death, he was still forced down Cloud's End cliff in the end. It was also because of a moment of mercifulness that gave Burning Heaven clan the chance to abduct his grandfather and little aunt. It wasn't because his heart had become ice cold and dark, it was instead the 2 lives he lived once and once again teaching him that any mercy to the enemy was cruelty to the people by his side, and sometimes, this cruelty was fatal. However, amidst Burning Heaven clan's remains, not everyone beside Yunche was a corpse. Just ahead of Yunche, a figure shakingly stood up. His hair was messy, his face full of dust, and his body riddled with wounds, but his pair of eyes emitted a light even more vicious than that of a ferocious wolf. His body swayed, and he was only able to stand up after using almost all of his power. But along with an explosive roar, his entire body suddenly flooded out a surge of enormous strength from who knew where, as his entire body pounced toward Yunche with his 2 hands tightly gripping toward Yunche's throat. His actions made Yunche's gaze abruptly jump. His body was already completely exhausted, yet he still erupted with such a strength. And this was evidently a strength squeezed out from the soul. Having lived 2 lives, it's actually the first time Yunche had met someone similar to him, who had a willpower strong enough to squeeze out strength from within the soul. Yunche raised his arm and casually swung. A gust of howling wind swept the person a great distance away. He laid on the ground, his entire body trembling, and then, he actually slowly raised his upper body again. In those pair of eyes that stared wide with anger was a brimming hatred carved down to the bone and soul. Fen Juechen, you ought to just save some of your energy for breathing. Back then at the Blue Wind Profound Palace, even though you weren't my match, you could at least barely fight with me. But the you now doesn't even have the qualifications of making me take a straight glance at you. With your strength, even if I am to stand here without moving, you still wouldn't be able to harm a single strand of my hair. Yunche apathetically stared at the youth in front of him whose entire body was filled with hatred and maliciousness. I won't kill you today, and only you. But don't worry, the reason I won't kill you is not because I pity you, and more so not because I don't want to kill you. I understand the consequences of not digging out the roots when cutting weeds better than anyone. But when my little aunt left, she had especially appealed to me and asked me to spare your life. I promised her, and anything I promise my little aunt, I will definitely achieve. Yunche said coldly. Cutting weeds without removing the roots would certainly leave troubles, and the expression in Fen Juechen's eyes caused Yunche to feel incomparably certain that sparing his life today would be much more dangerous than even leaving Fen Yijue alive. What would be left would perhaps be unpredictable future troubles. However, since he had already promised Xiao Lingxi to spare Fen Juechen, he would absolutely not kill Fen Juechen. Moreover, from what Xiao Lingxi had said, if not for Fen Juechen getting in the way several times, Xiao Lingxi might have ended her own life because of Fen Juechen, before he'd even reached Burning Heaven clan. This was also enough to become the reason for him to spare Fen Juechen's life. As for the possible consequences, he was willing to completely shoulder them. As those words fell upon Fen Juechen's ears, he felt himself awash with immense humiliation. No matter the reasons as to why Yunche had spared his life, it all seemed to him like a form of sympathy from a person who set out to kill his kinsman and annihilate his entire clan. Yunche, kill me if you have the guts. I don't need mercy and sympathy from a fiend like you. Fen Juechen gasped rudely, his fingers dug deeply into the ground, as streaks of blood flowed freely between them. His eyes stared daggers with deep killing intent, desiring to tear Yunche to pieces with his gaze. I shall repeat myself, the reason as to why I am not killing you is not because I pity you, nor is it sympathy, but is due to my little aunt's plea to spare you. However, this will be the only time I'm showing you such leniency. If one day you do dare to plot against me nefariously, I will personally kill you. So, if you do intend to seek revenge, look for me once you have cultivated the sufficient strength. Do not waste this rare opportunity at life you have been given. Without giving Fen Juechen another look, Yunche turned his body, and silently departed. Looking at Yunche's departing figure, Fen Juechen's eyes bulged wildly, as his heavily weakened body struggled violently. He yelled out with a voice as coarse as sandpaper, Yunche, you're not allowed to leave. You're not allowed to leave. I have not taken your life. I want to kill you. I want to break your body into 1,000 pieces and grind your bones into ashes. I want to let you experience all the suffering in the world. You're not allowed to leave. Get back here. Despite Fen Juechen's hysterical cries, Yunche's departing steps were undeterred, and in a short amount of time, Yunche disappeared from Fen Juechen's line of sight. He threw himself onto the ground, grasping the charred ashes that littered the ground with his blood-stained hands, and began to weep with the utmost despair. More than 10 years have passed since he started cultivating profound energy to now, yet he had never shed a single tear. But today, he wept deeply with heart-rending pain. His parents, his paternal grandfather, all his kinfolk, clansmen, and his home, were all gone. His life as the offspring of the clan master disappeared in the span of a day, leaving him with nothing. All that he was left with was a vast and limitless hatred which coursed through his very heart, blood, marrow, and soul. The entirety of his consciousness had the imprint of Yunche's figure deeply branded into it. I want to take revenge. I want to take revenge. I want to take revenge. Yunche. I will kill you. Even if I am hacked to pieces and suffer through the 9 levels of hell, I will kill you. The sounds of his rage-filled vow were carried to great distances by the desolate wind, and as the sky became more gloomy, the howling wind became hurried, as though the boundless sky was quaking in fear from the intense hatred carried in his voice. The reason as to why I am not killing you is because of my little aunt's plea to spare your life. It was her. It was her who pleaded Yunche not to kill me. It was her who allowed me to have this wretched life. Fen Juechen's gaze suddenly became misty, as those unforgettable times began to surface in his mind. That fateful day, he personally brought an entourage to Floating Cloud City to abduct Yunche's 2 family members. When he had arrived at the rear mountain area at the Xiao residence, in that blink of an eye when he saw Xiao Lingxi, his usually domineering and haughty demeanor and state of mind fell apart. At that time, Xiao Lingxi was sitting by a creek, with both her hands on her knees. She exuded a sweet-smelling fragrance, her gaze was misty-eyed, with an affectionate look, though it was not clear what exactly captured the attention of her mind. The waterfall-esque rivulets of water gushed into the creek, causing the water in its wake to scatter quietly. From Fen Juechen's angle, all he could glimpse was the side of her face, yet simply just from seeing this side of her face, his heart was acutely entranced for the very first time in his life. With exquisite and tender brows, her nose seemed to be crafted from the finest jade. She had delicate and sweet-smelling lips, her beautiful eyes shone like precious gems, her smooth snow-white skin overflowing with the luster and gloss, seemingly covered with a layer of cosmetic powder. In the boundless mountains surrounded by pristine water bodies, and the blossoming of flowers heralding the arrival of spring, the luscious greenery, as well as the landscape that presented a beauty beyond imagination, completely dimmed when placed beside the illuminant beauty of the young lady, only able to serve as a mundane prop. Fen Juechen felt a ferocious tugging of his heartstrings. He who had never once seen a girl like her felt his emotions run wild in that moment. He could not even be sure if what laid before his eyes was a girl, or a beautiful and elegant fairy from the mountains. In that moment, he felt himself falling under an indescribable and inescapable spell. Going from the Burning Heaven clan to Floating Cloud City took him 4 days. Yet the return journey back to the Burning Heaven clan from Floating Cloud City took him close to 6 days. He meticulously slowed the pace, as he was worried that Xiao Lingxi could not bear the arduous quick pace back. Throughout the journey, he ensured that Xiao Lingxi was not harmed by anyone. Conversely, he took the initiative to reassure her that nothing would put her safety at risk, and also that it would not be long when he would personally send her back home. And he complied with what he had promised, even as to go so far as to come to blows with Fen Juechen, as he absolutely would not permit any harm to come to Xiao Lingxi. Never would he have thought that Xiao Lingxi would actually specially beg for mercy on his behalf to Yunqi, sparing his life in the process. An unexplainable feeling surfaced in his heart. In his world, which was clouded with hatred and coldness, suddenly came a feeling of utmost warmth and gentleness. Yet immediately, at the crossroads of his doom, he left behind those feelings of his. All he could think of now was hatred. And she was inevitably Yunqi's little aunt, the kinsman of the demon that annihilated his family. Kill, kill. I will definitely kill you. I will have my revenge. Fen Juechen stood up, looking at the scorched earth beneath his feet with a vacuous gaze. He began to stumble forward with no idea where he should go or where he could go, plodding forward like a machine, his steps landing upon a ground that was burned beyond recognition. He passed countless bodies as he trudged on, and it was at this moment, he suddenly heard a soft groan sound out beside his ear. Fen Juechen froze his tracks and threw himself to the ground, furiously scrambling towards the side of Fen Yijue's body. Fen Yijue's chest had a blood-filled cavity that was approximately the size of a human brain. His inner organs were completely broken down. In that moment, he was completely breathless. Almost close to 2 hours had passed. Even if he was a throne, he should have passed on beyond the point of no return. Yet he was not completely dead, hanging on dearly to his final breath. In that moment when Fen Juechen threw himself to the ground beside him, his eyelids gently fluttered open. Grandpa? Grandpa? Fen Juechen and Fen Yijue usually did not have much interaction with one another. There was even no love lost between the two, yet in that moment, looking at his paternal grandfather who still had life in him, Fen Juechen was trembling from his uncontrollable emotions. Chenna! Fen Yijue called out in an extremely weakened voice, and hurriedly, he used all his remaining strength and lifted his right arm, and among his fingers, clasped a pitch-black key which was shrouded in black mist. Chenna, this key was left behind by your forefathers, seals a forbidden taboo, and a terrifying secret. Our forefathers left a message that only at the end of one's rope are we able to take out this key. Within this key lies a memory imprint. It will guide you towards the place where this key can be used. It will make you lose your soul, lose everything, even destroy the entire profound sky continent. However, our Burning Heaven clan should not be left in such dire straits. You must take revenge. Take revenge. Fen Yijue's uplifted right arm came crashing down heavily, as the last breath of life left his body. He desperately clung onto the last vestiges of his life and refused to pass on, all for the need to pass down the Burning Heaven clan's last secret. A forbidden secret. Fen Juechen reached out with a trembling hand, closing Fen Yijue's eyes, who passed on without contentment. His other hand, which held the pitch-black key, tightened. Suddenly, a strange black mist started to flow out from the gaps between his fingers and a strange demonic presence drifted out. With the destruction of the Burning Heaven clan came the exhaustion of Yunqi's evil intentions. He was extremely clear of what he had committed, and even clearer of the troubles he would attract from the great stir he had caused, as well as the repercussions of doing so. After leaving the Burning Heaven clan, Yunqi called out to the Snow Phoenix beast, which soared into the sky, heading towards the north, flying straight back to the Blue Wind Imperial City. You have indeed activated the Mirror of Samsara, passed through a reincarnation, and altered the karmic cycle. Yunqi was just about to fall asleep on top of the back of the Snow Phoenix beast when Jasmine's voice suddenly rang out in his mind. Why do you say that? Yunqi's eyes, which had just closed, fluttered open, as he questioned back. killing so many people in one go, yet maintaining such a somber expression. Even your aura and pulse did not experience a single change. Even the most ruthless and murderous demon would not have been able to maintain his cool in the face of taking so many lives. Jasmine coldly said, "You are only at the age of 19. Based on your life's experiences, it is not possible to have achieved such a feat. The only possible explanation is that you have used the mirror of samsara and undergone a reincarnation. Before activating the mirror of samsara, your life experiences must not have been mundane, and you must have definitely taken countless lives, bearing upon yourself countless sins and blood debts. And the fact that the mirror of samsara had no reaction is proof that it had been used within these past 20 years. The azure cloud continent's time period is misaligned with the profound sky continents, and during the time in which you were sent to the azure cloud continent by the evil god Soul, all kinds of unusual reactions took place. I had my suspicions at that point in time. I can now deduce, you must have had a previous life on the azure cloud continent. That Sulinga must have been one of your female companions." "Who?" Yunche lightly let out a sigh. With Jasmine, there was definitely nothing in which he could keep from her. Closing his eyes, he gently spoke, "Your guess is indeed correct. I did have an unfathomable past life. Moreover, it was on the azure cloud continent. But it was in that time that I should have lost my life after falling to my death, yet I had no idea why I was reborn here. It wasn't until I knew that I had the mirror of samsara in my possession that I started piecing together the facts slowly. Yet this matter, other than you, who else would have believed me even if I had told them the truth? Do you remember that time I once mentioned to you, the people whom I have killed far outstrips the number of those you have killed? At that time, you treated my words with contempt, yet I really was not joking with you at all. Not only are the people I have killed greater in number than those you have killed, the number is way more insurmountable than you can imagine. If you think of yourself as a vile creature, a demon who could never be forgiven, then I, Yunche, turned away, and added in an indifferent manner, am the demon among all demons. But I have never once taken a life in vain, or ever regretted every single life that I have taken. I believe you and I are alike in this sense." Jasmine became taciturn, and turned silent for a long time. After a while had passed, Jasmine suddenly chimed, "This time, you spared the one person that you shouldn't have. That Fen Juechen is extremely dangerous. In the future, perhaps there is possibility that he might have the ability to threaten you. I am aware of that. His willpower is astonishingly strong. Under the provocation he has suffered today, his desire to seek revenge against me will lead him to acquire strength at all costs no matter the methods, and become a crazed lunatic who is willing to forsake everything. However, regardless of whether he had saved Little Aunt, or because Little Aunt interceded on his behalf, I was unable to take action against him." Following that, Yunche's mouth twitched, and added in a relaxed manner, "I have the dragon god and phoenix's bloodline, and the evil god's profound veins within my body. Even if he became a lunatic among lunatics, it would not be possible for him to catch up to me in terms of strength. I instead hope that he can treasure this precious life that was given to him by my little aunt and find a place to spend his life peacefully and safely. If the day should come when he does come looking for me to take revenge, the only road left to me would be to reunite him with his deceased family members." Episode 50 is end here. Next episode coming tomorrow. Thanks for watching.